It's time to get the breakdown started. 1, 2, 3. First up, 10 observations.
Took it high and just boom, put it right on the ground.
It's First and 10.
Let's dive right in with number 1.
We don't have the numbers right now.
Oh, we don't have the numbers. Number 1. What we need is actually not just the numbers, Anthony. What we would need is to have pulled the old Vince Lombardi famous NFL Films clip. What the hell's going on out there? That's what we need. And specifically out there is when the Commanders defense is on the field. Oh, yeah. Anthony, you got time for number 2, bro, because we're going to spend some time on this defense. That was thoroughly, and I genuinely mean this, embarrassing. There is no fight, no passion, no fire, no anything that is inspiring whatsoever about their performance. And oh, by the way, it also tactically stunk. And when you are that bad, there is plenty of blame to go around. There is players, there's coaches. Basically, when you give up 40, especially to a team that previously offensively had been really struggling for much of the season and only found itself for exactly one half against the only defense that is keeping you from being on track to be the worst defense in NFL history, because they currently are actually on track to be worse than you in the Denver Broncos. Yeah, there's plenty. That was a run-on sentence that was so long I don't even remember where it started, which is about the length of the game that it probably felt to be a Washington Commanders defensive player last night. Long, arduous, painful. Let's start off with the coaching. It is very clear to me that whatever they are trying to ask these guys to do is not working. And that is not exactly brilliant analysis, but it doesn't take a brilliant analyst when they gave up 40 to the Bears. And so I think it's important to parse out the different parts of coaching. There is the actual game plan itself, which I didn't love but didn't hate. They probably played a little bit more zone match than I anticipated. I still think that there's issues marrying some of the blitzes and some of the coverages. That's something that is going to take some time to look at the tape and to have a fuller understanding. And, as we sit here less than 24 hours afterwards, haven't had time to do that yet, in part because they don't release the tape to those of us who don't have some kind of behind-the-scenes hookup for getting it from someone within the team or somewhere else in the league. We don't have that hookup until NFL Game Pass posts it tomorrow. So that's going to take a little bit more time. But there is also the question of how well do they execute the techniques and the game plan that you're asking them as coaches. And eventually, when consistently the answer is not well, that's not reflective of the players anymore. That is reflective of the coaches. And that is reflective of how good are you as teachers. And this has been a question I have long had about many of the people who have worked for Ron Rivera and Ron Rivera himself. And now, is Rivera teaching a lot of technique at this point in his career? Of course not. He's a head coach. Not many coaches in the NFL do, outside the rare exceptions of your Sean McVays that love to run around on the practice field, even though those days could very easily be long behind them. But generally speaking, it is on the position coaches and the coordinators to get that. And it is also important on anybody who is up in front of the room teaching any kind of schematics, which Ron is not doing, which is probably a separate discussion, but he's not doing that, to instill in your players an understanding of why you must do things a certain way. Why, on a global level, we are trying to keep guys in front of us. Why we are pushing a player in this particular coverage to the sideline, and why it is imperative that you push them all the way and do not just push them halfway. And on those extremely macro levels, nevertheless, the micros of footwork and hand placement, the Commanders stink right now. And that's a damning indictment of the coaching staff. And that goes from Del Rio down to every single position coach where guys are struggling. It is particularly bad in the secondary right now, where Percy Butler has not been very good, where Derek Forrest has been between not very good and bad. Cam Curl has been fine, mostly, but has had his moments. Obviously, Fuller, St. Juste, and Forbes all had bad moments last night. But you simply cannot play this way and expect to win in the NFL. And you could have flawed game, like you play too much of one coverage or whatever from a schematic standpoint and still be way better than this. This speaks to a lack of accountability in teaching. And that accountability can be you are not actually getting through to the players and then holding them responsible for those things. Or it could just be you're a bad teacher. And that is potentially on the table here. And that's not fixable, frankly. Like, these are grown men who have gotten very far in their careers, doing well enough to be position coaches, be coordinators, be assistant whatevers. And at that stage, it is rare that you adapt and evolve. Now, there are coaches that can do it, that realize, like, I got to change, I got to adapt, I got to evolve. And one theory, even speaking of, like, adapting and evolving, that I threw out on Take Command with Logan this morning is that part of what Jack Del Rio specifically, a guy who's been in this for a long time and has coordinated top 5 defenses and was a head coach and clearly knows a ton of football, one thing that he might not have adapted to in the last 7-8 years of the NFL is the new CBA. Like, when you start slow every year and then you were like, we got a bunch of young guys. Welcome to the freaking NFL in 2023. That is no longer an excuse because every team has young guys because that's how the CBA is set up. It's a problem, but it's like the most macro problem that exists possibly in the entire league until you get to the existential commissioner level stuff. But they've designed a CBA where it is way more beneficial to get cheap rookies than it is to have veterans in your locker room who know what the hell they're doing. And so every team has young guys with way less veterans that they used to have and guys who used to be on the back end of their careers that are kind of as good as the rookies but at least have institutional knowledge aren't around in locker rooms anymore. Because you'd rather have a guy who's mostly playing special teams or might start for you, but is not going to be your number one guy, is not going to be your future star at the position. You'd rather have those guys be contractually rookies and young guys. And so, yeah, you wind up with Benjamin St-Juste being a starting corner. The Kendall Fullers are more and more rare. Guys who make it to their third contract. You have Percy Butler and Derek Forrest on rookie deals as starters. And if you can't get those guys ready to play by week 1, you can't cut it in this league anymore. And I don't know whether, I don't mean that to say, Jack Del Rio stinks and he's got to be fired right now, although we're going to talk about that realistically later on in the show. But that is the reality of being a defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator or a head coach or a position coach in the modern NFL. If you can't get young guys to be ready to play right now, season starts in September. You better be ready. There's only 17 of these things. And year after year after year with Rivera and Del Rio, they have not been ready to go. The results are what they are. They speak for themselves. I think I've said enough on that one. Anthony, did you ever find number 2?
Number 2.
Let's talk about Emmanuel Forbes, and let's talk about Forbes himself. Eventually, there is a responsibility that gets on the players. This is not all on the coaches. Again, when you give up 40 to the Bears, there is plenty of responsibility to go around. And Emmanuel Forbes deserves, I don't even like the word deserves, grades at getting a lion's share of it. He refuses to do the things that they say. And it might be a comfort thing. It might be an understanding thing. It might be, I don't know what else. And they drafted him, and they keep putting him out there. So that's on them as coaches. But at the end of the day, if your coach is telling you, hey, keep it in front of you, don't gamble, stop doing that. How many times do you need to get burned by guys with 2 initial first names and 5-letter last names? DJ Moore, AJ Brown. Any more that coming up on the schedule? What are we doing? This is just, at some point, how many times are you going to put your hand on the stove? You've been burned, man. Stop doing that. You're a pro now, which means you get pro criticism. And I don't enjoy this, but someday, the lack of discipline, or at some point, the lack of discipline is the main issue. That being said, this goes back to the scouting and their decision to take him in the first round. The weight's an issue, man. I hate that. I hate that someone's, weight or body or whatever has to be talked about like this on a radio station, but it's impacting the performance. It's nothing about his character, nothing about whatever else. It just is a fact. DJ Moore at the top of routes is shoving him, and he is going way too far away from DJ Moore. And it is a legal amount of contact, and he is getting flung to the side. And that also means that when you're in the NFL, and maybe you got flung a little bit in college too, but you got flung 1 yard instead of 3, and now you're trying to jump back in the play and get a pick or a PBU, and you're not getting the ball because not only do you have more ground to cover, but the arms are stronger. Justin Fields has a freaking cannon, and now DJ Moore's running up the sideline. Like, this is an issue. He's going to have to either put on weight or learn how to play at this weight. But this ain't working right now, and it's why Ron Rivera ultimately benched him last night, and it sounds like he might not get back in the rotation immediately, or certainly not with a high number of snaps moving forward based off what Rivera was saying today. Those are the two biggest things for me from the game in our 1st and 10. I got 8 other points I want to make, though. We'll run through them quickly next. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Our 2 biggest points down. Let's continue now. 1st and 10. We start the show day after games with the biggest takeaways from the game. Talked about the defense. Talked about Emmanuel Forbes. Anthony, let's go ahead and hit that number 3.
Number 3.
Let's talk about the lack of pressure. I think the actual biggest thing here in the lack of pressure by this defensive line is the game plan. Like, some of this is by design and based off who you're playing. I know that's incredibly unsatisfying, and that is not me saying that the defensive line is playing great, but it is important to be fair and to be accurate and to try to explain what's happening here. And part of this is you were facing Justin Fields, and that's after facing Jalen Hurts, which is after facing Josh Allen, after facing Russell Wilson. Those are all quarterbacks that you want to keep in the pocket and make them beat you by deciphering your defense. You need to do that in a way that you still get pressure, though. And I think the clean pockets that you see, especially the first couple of drives last night, oh my God. Like, Justin Fields could have had a snack. And it was crazy because they showed the stat later in the game that the longer he was back there, like any drop back that was over 4 seconds, he actually didn't have a completion. Versus he was getting the ball out of his hands faster, and that was good. But that speaks to an offense that's running on time and efficiently. But it also speaks to the fact that Justin Fields, wasn't getting a lot of pressure. And you can make stuff that's happening quickly happen ineffectively. And that's where the sweet spot is that the Commanders have not figured out yet. And I think the bigger issue with the front is they've been bad against the run. And I know everyone wants to kill Cody Barton, and Cody Barton is not playing good football. But Cody Barton could be playing better football if he didn't have so much ground to cover, because the D-line was actually making the kind of plays that they made when they were humming last year. And those plays are definitely not happening with any regularity right now. Not just the big tackles for loss, but like, can you do 1-2 yard gain limits? I think that is where my bigger concern with the defensive line is right now. With that said, number 4. Chase Young is playing really well, and he looks explosive as hell. And it was interesting last night, Kirk Herbstreit on the Amazon broadcast, who's obviously known Chase very well since his days at Ohio State. Kirk lives in Columbus, is an OSU alum, etc., etc. He's like, watch me. Chase told Kirk, like, watch me tonight. I feel as good right now as I have since the injury. And so Chase is really starting to find it. His pressure rates, his win rates and pass rush, like, he is doing all the stuff. I mean, there's a play last night where he chases down a run from the backside, and you're like, hell yeah. He's still not, like, I still don't know what's going on with this line in terms of playing together. John Allen, we'll get to him in a second. But, like, as an individual, it's pretty clear that they got to figure out how to play with Chase Young playing like this and be effective, because this is a dangerous, dangerous football player. And if you want to take anything positive defensively out of last night, I would say Chase's performance is probably your best bet. That said,
number 5.
I wonder if John Allen's still hurt. Now, John had some moments last night. He had the suplex, which was fun. But at the end of the day, like, he has definitely not been, and he's not playing bad ball, but he's not playing John Allen great ball. Daron Payne's playing really well. Like, PFF is grading him out as the best player week in, week out on this defense. They got their grades up already, and he was the guy that they have as the best player last night on defense, Daron Payne talking about. But with Allen, like, I do wonder if he is hurt and still, or if he's playing his way back into shape. He's playing less than the other 3 guys. By the way, all those guys are playing too much. That's something else we probably could have put in this 1st and 10. I mean, Chase played like 89% of the snaps. That's ridiculous, especially on a Thursday night after the Sunday night game. So I think that for John, like, this rest period is really important for him to get right and then continue to work hard and figure out how he can get back to being more dominant. Again, John Allen's not playing bad ball, but he's not getting paid, and this defense is designed for him just to not play bad ball. He's got to play really, really good to great ball, And that has certainly not been happening so far this season.
Number 6.
Let's talk about that fatigue factor. I think one of the ways, if you want to be optimistic about last night, to look at this game would be to say it is a fluky Thursday night game following a terrible emotional loss on Sunday. And by the way, the irony of them having to go for 2 so much last night, just chef's kiss. Shout out to the script writers. Y'all did great with that one. But the fatigue of having to play in overtime and playing against Philadelphia, who's physical as all hell, and then going on a Thursday night against a team that's hard to prepare for, if you want to take an optimistic spin, I actually don't think that's totally irrational. That said, how do you manage that as coaches? The reality that your team is tired, that it is a quick turnaround, and playing as many snaps as they did for their stars defensively last night, specifically on the front, is just, to me, like borderline malpractice. And I know Chase was awesome, but like Casey Tuhill played like 6 snaps. Why? Just play him more. And if you can't, like, why'd you keep him? Like, Casey Tuhill's a good football player. He played well for you last year. Get him on the field more so that Montez and Chase can be even more effective because they're not as tired. And it's just, Abdullah Anderson seemed like he was out there a lot more for John, and maybe that speaks to what I was just talking about with him playing his way back into shape after missing so much of training camp with the plantar fasciitis. But, damn, man, like, did someone tell Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio that was a game last night where your guys might be coming in not at 100% from a fatigue standpoint? Because it sure didn't look like it. All right, to the offense.
Number 7.
Sam Howell, who was largely very good last night. Like, if you want to take a positive in general out of this game, it's that I still think that they have found their franchise quarterback. He just passes the eye test. He passes the toughness test. Some of these runs, like, don't ever call Sam Howell sneaky athletic. We know what you're saying. He's a white guy who can run. We got it. He's just athletic, and he's tough, and he's hard to bring down. And all of that stuff is great. His arm is fantastic. He's going to get even better as a passer as he gets more experience. But the biggest flaw in his game right now, and this is not something new, this is not fresh analysis. I'm just going to frame it in a different way as I continue to refine, like, as you see him, like the thing we are trying to get at, you can talk about more specificity because it becomes more apparent in more detail with more snaps that you get to watch. But the thing that right now is the biggest hole in his game is the ability to manipulate the pocket. And he needs to learn how to extend plays without just running up in the pocket. And that's where he's taking a lot of these sacks where he steps up. You know, last night he has one where Leno, quote unquote, gives up a sack. Leno didn't give up that sack. He had the pocket blocked. Sam stepped up right into the arms of the defender. Leno wasn't blocking that space. And so what Sam needs to learn how to do, and this is a process, and this is, you know, part of being a young quarterback, is he needs to learn how to extend plays outside the pocket because he's really good on the run. He keeps his eyes downfield, and with the threat to run, guys are going to uncover. He has made so many plays this year when he can get out on the edge, and he's got to figure out how to do that with a little bit more consistency. And I think even more importantly, extend plays within the pocket. The old Tom Brady trick of moving around, manipulating that space a little bit, and it's harder for him because he's shorter. That is just a reality. But how does he move within the pocket to make sure that it's not, I hit the top of my drop, I stand there, oh crap, it's not available. Now I try to run, which makes it impossible for your O-line to protect you. That is the next step for him. That is the thing he's got to work on. And if not, despite all of the great stuff, he's not going to survive in the league because he's just going to take too many hits. And that's just, we've seen that before. Like, he's so talented. He's going to make it basically unless that happens, in my opinion. So how do you mitigate that as soon as possible? That is a question I still have. All right, last 3 real quick.
Number 8.
This version of Curtis Samuel is what we should have been seeing for 3 years. Obviously, the first year was just totally plagued by injury. But it is hilarious to me that Eric Bieniemy has nailed the Curtis Samuel usage after Scott Turner brought him from Carolina, where he had him in the same offense. But this version of let's get a jet sweep here, a quick out here, get the ball in his hands in space. And oh, by the way, he's a pretty darn good wide receiver. Curtis Samuel's been really good so far this year, like true bright spot. That was actually one thing that I feel pretty good about in the prediction business, because I thought one of the guys who would be helped the most by Bieniemy is Samuel. This was one of the first games where he didn't have an actual physical carry, but like still super effective. They have gotten the Curtis Samuel thing right, and congrats to Eric Bieniemy on doing that. And I'm probably going to end that there instead of taking another pot shot at Scott Turner.
Number 9.
Shout out Logan Thomas. What a game from him. I was watching it back this morning, and I wrote this one down after he has that dive on third down. Comes back from the concussion, takes a big hit last week on a big catch. And, you know, this week he was featured way more. Just the way the Bears defense focused things. They were clearly focused on Terry McLaurin, who was not involved enough at all. That's something that we'll probably talk about next week once we've had a chance to watch the tape a little bit more. But Logan Thomas is available, and dude made plays. The fumble is so unfortunate. And in many ways, he's just got to go down there. But he's trying to make a play. He's trying to push forward. And he's actually like too strong. He just kept moving forward as opposed to getting stood up. You kept waiting for the whistle to blow. And eventually, if your guys are tearing at the ball for 4 seconds, it's really hard to hold on to it. So don't even really hold that against him in any major way. Although, God, that was unfortunate in terms of the timing. But the effort he played with, like that dive on that third down in the second half, that is big time stuff. And the lack of fear, the kind of leadership he shows. Shout out Logan Thomas. Salute. Had a great game. Deserves to be acknowledged for it. And then last but not least,
Number 10.
the concept of new ownership, same results. I would just like to remind fans that Josh Harris has been the Commanders' owner for about 10 weeks. That is not very much time, and because of when he took over, there has not been time to really evaluate and make changes. He did not take over this team in January, where if he had acted, you know, what some people would call irrationally, I'm going to come in, I'm going to fire everyone, I've been watching from afar, I've seen enough, and I have a whole pool of candidates to pick from. You can't do that on July 20th. You cannot fire your head coach 3 days before training camp, no matter how much some fans think that you can. It's just unfeasible to literally operate the football operation that way. Now, with that said, is there some things that could be done? And philosophically, are we deep enough into this process to start thinking about those things? I actually think there's a corollary here. There is an analogy to make of to why this feeling feels so similar. And that is where I want to go next on The Hoffman Show on the Team 980, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, and always live, of course, on the free Odyssey app.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.